Welcome, friends of Jack.org. You are listening to another episode of Jack Amplified. I am your host, Michael Braithwaite. I have the great pleasure of being the CEO and president at Jack.org, which means I work with a lot of people much more talented than I am to install programs throughout our country and a little internationally through a Be There certificate that really look to kind of peel back the onion and work upstream around the prevention of youth mental health. Every week on Jack Amplified, or every other week, we try and tackle different topics. This week, we are looking at workplace wellness. And we've read a lot about it in the news as of late, especially around young people going freshly into the workforce, the frustration around kind of our gig economy and people going into the workforce, but also the struggles of young people that are freshly entering into a workforce. This is a different generation, folks. I mean, they've had to survive a pandemic, something that's never happened, in our lifetime before, and it's presented different challenges. And we're going to talk with two amazing guests today about workplace wellness. And I hope, and we're going to do something a little different this week. Usually I read bios, which I'm going to be honest with you, is a little boring, right? Because I'm reading it from a paper. And what we're going to do this week is I'm going to ask Jackson and Denis, our two guests, to introduce themselves, because then they can choose what they want to tell you about themselves, and it's much more animated. So without further ado, we're going to go to this week's guest. We're going to start with Jackson. Jackson, I was hoping you can introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey.
Yes. Yeah, happy to. So nice to meet everyone. My name's Jackson. I am a debt capital markets associate with Bank of America in their Toronto office. So I've been there about 4.5 years now and joined right out of school. So I started my career during the heart of the COVID-19 pandemic. I did an internship with B of A in summer 2020, and then I joined full-time, first remote, and then as we transitioned back into the office, moved down to Toronto as well. So certainly went through during that period of time, starting my career as a young professional in Toronto, and then seeing the transition over the last few years and hiring a few individuals myself, saw both the opportunities and challenges that both myself and my colleagues went through. And I'd say certainly I'm very passionate about promoting mental health in the workplace and ensuring that our junior colleagues such as myself and those I work with are able to have the best work experience and the most enrichment in their personal and professional lives.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jackson. Thanks for taking the time today to join us. Denis, tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey.
Thanks, Michael and Jackson. Really excited to do this for you, with you today. Interesting journey, Michael. As I got in the background there, you could see that I'm with KPMG. I joined during the days of the PMEM, so I've been at this for a while. But from background, I'm a CPA. I headed up our private company enterprise practice, did some public companies, so on. Lived experience with clinical depression, and when I was not afraid to be vulnerable, it kind of led to me joining our ID&E council, and people saw the passion I had around mental health in the workplace. So when I tried to take early retirement, the firm approached me and asked me if I'd be their first ever chief mental health officer. So it's a very humbling role, Michael, to basically own the mental health lens for 10,000 people. So, yeah, you wonder how you go from accountant to chief mental health officer. I still ask myself that every day, but it's a very exciting role and very humbling that people allow you into their circle of care to make a difference. So it's a lot of fun.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. And it's such we're going to dive more into that, how that all happened, right? Because for years past and for many years, and if we go back even when you were talking about with the P and the M, mental health, I mean, not only was it talked about, not in the workplace, it wasn't talked about at home or at all, right? Mental health was not seen as health at all. And we've seen some momentum change. And Denis, I like to think too, that when it comes to, I was talking with someone about you yesterday, a young man named Jordan Friesen, and we were talking about you. And
Yeah.
I said, there's not many people in this world that can say, like, we'll say, hey, we did this, and we hope that some change happened because of that. But you've, due to your efforts, there's been systemic, like systems have changed. And I know in talking with you one-on-one, they've changed as well. Like, and then hasn't been without uh, painstaking hard work. But I want to go back, in your different stages right now in your professional careers, you starting in accounting. And Denny, we'll start with you. I'd love to hear about your personal experiences navigating in earlier in your career, mental health challenges in the workplace. What did that look like for you? And then we'll go over to Jackson.
Well, if we go back historical, Michael, like you said, we just didn't talk about it, right? And even personally, my own, I think success is education. I did not know anything about mental health. White male from Northern Ontario, zero diversity, and we sure didn't talk about mental health. So I was no different than some people that I have the pleasure to work with today, where I was suffering in silence, Michael, and I was afraid to ask for help, right? Because come from a generation of just, hey, suck it up and get it done, right? It was just the way it was, right? You didn't talk about mental health at school. You sure as heck didn't have amazing resources like Jack.org, being the voice of youth mental health out there on campus and so on. So you just fluffed it off, Michael, I would say. It's not that people weren't there for you, but you just didn't talk about it, right? Nobody had training. So when you did ask for help, it was maybe more a little bit, hey, Michael, take the weekend off, or here's a coupon to go to the spa and it's gonna pass, right? We just didn't know what we know today.
Yeah, 100%. Right. I mean, it was, and also, I mean, the stigma that went with it too, I would gather too. And many people, I think, in workplaces, and I'm sure this is still today that, and workplaces are different where, um, you're afraid if I disclose, what does that mean? Are they no longer going to trust me with promotion? Or are they going to think I can handle this or I can't manage people or they can't? That kind of fear of what does this do to my career, right? Moving forward. Now, Jackson, you're in a different stage. I would love to hear about your kind of most recent, like, hey, navigating mental health in the workplace. How did that look for you?
Yeah, I'd say I think for any young professional, including myself, the move from university, let's say in my instance, to the workplace, it's a very big transition. And I think for anyone, when you're in that stage of life, you go from, in my case, doing Zoom classes to working on transactions and being in an actual corporate professional environment. It takes a lot of work to really move to that environment, and it can definitely be stressful on your mental health. I think thankfully nowadays the supports that are offered are certainly a lot better, very much improved. I think a lot of the stigma, I think with my seniors and my colleagues, it's very largely removed. I can think of a few of my colleagues at some consulting firms, for example, who took a mental health leave and they were still very much top performers and are still top performers at the firm, and the firm realized that this is something that they have to prioritize and assist their employees with. So I think we've come a long way. I think there's still more work to do, but I think any young professional would be lying if they said it isn't a big transition, and that can certainly be a stressful period. So I really appreciate the support and organizations like Jack.org provide to raise awareness of that, and as well to assist young people as they make that leap.
Well, let's dig a little deeper on that. So a few years back, you finish university and everyone, you're at grad and like, what are you going to do now? And it's like that pressure there. Talk to me about what does it look like entering today's job market for a young person? Like, how do you feel?
Yeah, I'd say how I'd classify it, the one word I'd really characterize it with is competitive. I think even the difference now, the individuals I'm hiring and interviewing versus when even went through 5 years ago, and the people that were in my shoes back then are saying the same thing. I'm blown away by the quality of applicants that we're interviewing and just how many people are applying and how competitive it is. So I think that also adds to anxiety amongst people that are entering the workforce nowadays when there's so few spots available for roles and there's so many people that you're competing competing with, it just adds to the elevated level of anxiety of, am I going to be able to get the role I want? Is there a spot available for me? How many people am I going to be competing with? And I think that just adds to the overall level of tension amongst young people, just because the environment every year is becoming progressively more and more competitive. I'd say certainly once you're in the seat, I think that you do feel those supports are there. But when you're entering this environment, depending on your role, could be working 40, 50, 60, or upwards of 70 hours a week at times. And it's a stressful change, especially going from a student where you're maybe attending 15 hours worth of lectures to staying into the office, burning the midnight oil. It's a big transition, and one that you really have to buckle down and prepare for. But I think with the supports that companies are offering nowadays, it makes it a little bit easier, but it certainly is still a challenging transition to make.
No, thanks for that, Jackson. And Denny, working for one of those big organization that hires thousands of people, what is something that KPMG or others could do to really make that start a good start, to get young people off to a good start? What are some pieces you could put in place? What does KPMG do to do that, to support them?
I think it boils down to culture, Michael. It's a lot of organizations just get something to be able to tick a box. You and I, the last time I spoke to you, we talked about employee assistance program, and where people can't even find it and they don't know what it's for, right? So to me, it's the culture. It's like, are you really walking the talk, right? Are you just doing the mental health parade because it's Bell Let's Talk or Mental Health Week, so you rah, 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 and you're silent for the rest of the 360 days in a year, right? Or are you really embedding this in your practices? So certain things that I've seen that really work is onboarding. Actually, before this call, I was lining up the next equivalent to you, Jackson, in my workspace, where I team myself up with a psychologist, because Denis not a doctor, and I use somebody like you, Jackson, in the workspace, and we onboard all our new employees, and we do that quarterly. And over the last 2 years, we've had over a couple thousand people take that. And we're just talking about mental health. The facilitator, not unlike what you're doing here, Michael, is asking us questions, and Jackson, as a team member, would say how it was for him, what his experience was like, what resources he turned to. And the more, Michael, that you kind of demystify this by one little step I like is that there should be a button on your desktop that says mental health at XYZ, right? Like, just that fact alone of having the resources there and the tools available so that a new team member can imagine joining, and there's a button and you click there and boom, and you go. And we have 6 or 7 videos of lived experiences of some of our partners. You're the newbie and you see a partner, an owner, a boss who's not afraid to be vulnerable around mental health. So all these little actions, to me, move the dial in breaking stigma, right? Because it is still there, Michael, but I've seen the change, especially in our shop. And I don't know if that's a societal change, but it's definitely a change that I've seen in our culture. And I think a lot of it is because it's on the agenda, because we talk about it at some town halls, because we embed it in new manager training and new partner training. So it's not just like a flavor of it's Mental Health Week, we better talk about this. It's in fact, during those week, Michael, we don't do anything because there's enough amazing stuff that organizations such as Jack.org are doing, that I let people leverage off of that. And then before busy season, we pick another sweet spot. So it's not just one thing, Michael. And the credit to me goes to my team of 10,000 people, because I am one, but my team is 10,000. They're buying in, they're participating, they're utilizing our EAP, they're utilizing our benefits. So the combined effort kind of moves the dial.
And I know you've looked, when we talked about that EAP programs, and it's, not settling for what, bare minimum, right? So an employer would be like, okay, well, we got an EAP program, we're good, right? And you and I talked about that, where you were saying you look at EAP program and why weren't people using it? Well, one of the reasons they weren't using it was that every time you call, you get a different person. I have no control into who I talk to. Do they look like me? Will they understand me? If I'm going through cultural challenges, will they understand those? Are they from my background? Those kinds of things. And you've worked to move the dial on those pieces. I wondered, and to push benefit providers, that they kind of change that school of thought. I don't know if you could give a little, you know,
You nailed it, Michael. I mean, historically, the way it was designed, you call, and if Jackson's an S social worker, psychologist that's available, you get Jackson, or you get somebody like Denis, white male from Northern Ontario, right? The change came as a result. I remember an Asian team member said exactly that. Denis, why do I always get a white male that looks like you? I'm an Asian female. Why can I not have an Asian counselor? Good question, right? It was just the way it was, right? But now to have an EAP where you have diversity, Michael, some of the providers now, as a result, CVs are available. So imagine, Jackson, you could go to UEAP and see CVs of the counselors and you have a say. So that's huge, right? Diversity, choice. And the other big piece, Michael, is like you said, after 5 or 6 visits, it's, hey, Jackson, have a nice life. Nice working with you, bud. But if you need help, you can call back again, but you're never going to get me again. You're going to get Michael, right? Like, who designed that? So now the new component is ongoing care. Imagine if you could have 5 or 6 free visits, which is typical in the AP with Denis, but then you need ongoing care and you can continue working with that same counselor. So it's evolved, Michael. We're not quite there yet across the board, but providers are realizing that that's the ask now, right? Like, new talent like Jackson want us as an employer to be more involved in your well-being, and hence tools like that are critical to support our amazing team members when you need it.
yeah, and that's a great point, Jackson. When you went out, when you were searching for employment, where does that kind of employers looking after your well-being fall? When you're kind of saying, I mean, you're making a selection too. When you're being interviewed, you're interviewing that employer. Like, what kind of, when you're looking at a place and selecting a place to work, um, as a young person, you think, that mental health and well-being that an employer provides, does that score high up? Does that make a difference in selecting an employer?
Yeah, I would certainly say that it does. As I mentioned, for young people entering the workforce, it's a very competitive environment, but I'd say this generation that's entering the workforce is also very competitive. They're looking for employment opportunities that challenge them, that provide them with growth, but that also respect them as human beings and treat them as people and not just widgets in a machine. So I think employers that are offering these benefits and supports to their employees that just benefit and boost their overall quality of life and mental well-being and the like, I think that certainly people of my generation that are entering the workforce is something that is very compelling and attractive for them.
And looking back on your early experiences, Jackson, like in the workforce, would you say, like, would there be suggestions or changes you would have made that would have made your workplace a little healthier?
Yeah, I'd say just overall, I felt very well supported going into the work place that I'm in. I work at Bank of America. It's a large institution. They've implemented a lot of these employee assistance programs and supports for young people entering the workforce. I'd also say I work with a great group of people, and I think it's hard to overstate just how important it is the people that you work with. They buy into that and they support it, which definitely my bosses very much have, but also just they care about you as a human being. And I felt that was very much the case since day one. I'd say the main support I think that would have been helpful. I think a lot of the times where I felt overstressed or overworked at work or it was really taking a toll on my mental health, my bosses weren't even aware that it was happening. They weren't even aware that I was working super late or what I was on, or I was maybe doing something that wasn't mission critical or wasn't that important. And it was almost a waste in that sense. And that's certainly not something they were aiming for, but they just weren't aware. I think one of the things that will be great moving forward is better tracking of employees that are maybe putting in longer hours, that are maybe being overworked and that are overstressed, and just raising that to your manager almost in an automatic way, saying, hey, this employee's been logged on for 70, 80 hours this week. Maybe you should check in with them, see what's going on. Maybe there should be a rebalancing of staffing. I think those sorts of tools would greatly assist young people and avoid overwork and better long-term sustainability in their roles moving forward.
Yeah, great point. I mean, I remember always having conversations when you see someone who's putting in way more hours than they are contracted to do. You have the conversation around, hey, let's have a conversation around that. First, let's see if you're focused on the right things, and what are other things that are distractions that, as you said, maybe not priorities, and you're making everything a priority. And let's see how you're managing your workload. But aside from that, if you're doing a great job, and you're still putting in 50, 60 hours, which a lot of people most likely are, then let's not burn you out. Then let's see what we have to do to support you, right? How can we take some of that workload off or spread it out or do different things so you're not doing that? Because we want you to have, as I think Denny said at the very beginning, everyone talks about work-life balance, right? It's great to use those terms, but then to actually live it and create a culture that lives it, you have to have also your leaders that demonstrate that. I want to talk a little bit about managers and leaderships and environments who do that. And I think, Jackson, you're saying like people may not be aware. They also may not have the tools, right, to deal with it. So manager says, hey, Jackson's really, he's not at where he was when he first started. I guess, he just lost interest, but there might be something deeper going on there, but they have no idea how to address that. And so how do we create that workforce? Is it, Denny, I want to come over to you as someone who's done this. How do you create environments where employees feel safe asking for help? And how do you help managers learn to support their young staff in the workplace?
I think that's where the training comes in, Michael. Like I kind of describe the strategy that I like as awareness, training, and support. The support is the actual benefits. The awareness is all the events you do. The training is the more formalized stuff. Like utilizing mental health first aid training as an example for some of your people managers. We leverage off actually the amazing Jack.org certificate that you guys have. We have that on our website, and we promote in my con people sitting down with their kids or people sitting down with their teams and doing that 2-hour certification that you guys have on mental health. A lot of it too is making sure they understand their role, Michael. I think, when you think of first aid, if I see Jackson on the floor and I see blood, I would know what to do. I would run. I wouldn't say, hey, maybe you should go get the first aid kit and clean that up. Oftentimes for mental health, we're seeing things that aren't appropriate, right? We're trying to solve it. We're forgetting that we're not a doctor. I love your 5 golden rules in reminding my team members of your role. Say what you see. The first one, right? Hey, Jackson, I miss your beautiful smile. Are you okay? That's totally different than saying, hey, it looks like you slept in that shirt for a month. Your hair is awful, right? Like when people know their role, it's a lot easier. The listening non-judgmentally, right? The encouraging them to access resources, right? I'm not solving Jackson's challenge if he has one, but I'm listening to him non-judgmentally and encouraging him to access care. And that's where it kind of breaks down. A lot of people don't even know what the care is out there. A lot of people don't even know they have an EAP at work. A lot of people don't even know Jack.org exists, right? So the more that I view my role as helping my team members populate their mental health toolkit so that they have the tools to be able to play their role to support not only a colleague at work, but somebody at home as well, right? Anybody in their circle of care.
And that's such a good point, Denny, too, is that not as much. So Jackson, maybe now, I don't want to assume, but if you're when or when or if you said have children, one of the other pieces is not just around your mental health, the employee's mental health, but the employee's family, Denny, as you bring up. And I heard a stat recently where it's like 1 out of 4 adults in the workplace with kids have someone at home who is struggling with their mental health, and it's affecting how they're working, right? So understanding that. So when you do say, I miss that smile, it might be, it's not me, but one of my kids or my partner or whoever it is really struggling, and that's affecting me. And how do we support that as well? Now, your role, Denny, as chief mental health officer is a first. And I mean, they didn't say, hey, we're going to have a manager. They chief mental health officer. It's pretty significant. Can you talk about the significance of that and why maybe others should look at adopting that?
I think it boils down to accountability, Michael. Like let's step back for a sec and see in corporate Canada or in the business world where the ones responsible for mental health normally reside. It's in HR, right? I love my HR team. I couldn't do my role without them. But it's not because you're in HR that you're necessarily comfortable in this space, right? And it should be probably a bigger piece of your portfolio, but because of all the other demands, being an HR professional, it doesn't take the space that it has. So I think the key is accountability. It doesn't matter if it's outside or inside, but who in your organization at the end of the day is responsible and held accountable to have whatever it is, the awareness, the training, testing out new benefits, finding new benefits, monitoring it through KPIs as well, right? So I think that's been the difference, Michael, that normally it doesn't maybe get the attention that it needs because people saw how passionate I was about mental health, how I wasn't afraid to be vulnerable and put my story out there. And also, I think the tenure that I've been around for the organizations for a long time, right? I think earning the credibility, if you maybe have a part-time person doing this, it's viewed a little more as a program, right? Versus where if the person running it and responsible for it is homegrown and understands the work stressors, right? I think that's key, really understanding the drivers behind this business.
Thanks so much for that. Let me another question. Have you seen others kind of follow suit, other organizations, since you were first?
I I've seen two other people in the world that I've come across, Michael. And the world I got to define loosely, the world that Denis monitors through LinkedIn or people that have found me. And now I'm seeing more. One was a male as well in a bank in Australia, and the other one was actually in a well-known retail operation here in Canada. And the role since has been cut because of cutbacks. Interesting, right?
Yeah.
I think also doing this for the right reason too, Michael, like I made sure that this role wasn't being created to look good, to put Denise smile in a proposal that we had this. And it wasn't about that at all. I'll never forget my first discussions with our CEO. It's kind of like, don't know what this is going to look like, but you'll report to me and we'll figure it out together. So it's been an amazing journey, right? And when people realize that the return on investment here is positive right out of the gate in this space, there's studies that demonstrate year one that if you invest $1 in this space, your return is actually greater than $1. So when you sit back and think about that, what is it that employers out there could do that gives them a return as such in a competitive world, like Jackson said? And thank you, Jackson, for bringing change, because your generation is actually questioning benefits, right down to recruiting. Day one, U of T last year, we were being challenged why our mental health benefit is X and somebody else's is Y. So kudos to you guys that you really want to make sure that you're joining an organization where you can truly be your whole self and that you have the benefits that you need, right? It's still rare, Michael. Not to say that HR has an enhanced focus in this space. Absolutely. I always say since COVID, the boardroom door is wide open and there's a wedge underneath it and it's not closing. And people are trying to figure this out.
Yeah, which is good. I mean, it's lots of positive stuff happening. It's a shame when you hear that something's cut. It's one of the first things to go because it shouldn't be seen. And you certainly made sure, as you've told us now, and you've told me before, this wasn't just let's throw a fancy title up and show the people, as something cool and new. They put some real weight behind this. And as you said, and listen, if you invest in the health of your employees, not only are you doing the right thing, creating healthy workspaces, your productivity will climb. When people are at work, they're happy, healthy, and doing their work, productivity goes up. So yes, you're going to make more money. That shouldn't be your driver, but hey, no one's going to complain about that side effect too. Jackson, so you've gone through the transition from university to the workplace. If you were to advise a younger Jackson when you were first going through, or if you were to advise younger people coming to the workplace now, what advice would you give them? What steps can they take to be prepared as they enter the workplace?
Yeah, I think the first piece of advice I would give is just to put your best foot forward. And that just make sure that's just referring to just making sure you have everything in your life as much as you can in a good situation while you make that transition. So whether it be eating right, making sure you're prioritizing sleep, exercise, I think that sort of stuff just puts you in a good position so that you're putting your best foot forward when you make that transition. But I'd say beyond that, I would say certainly make sure that you're educating yourself and taking best advantage of the opportunities and the resources the company you're joining has, so that if you do encounter a stressful period of time, if you're having stresses on your mental health, you have those resources available and you're able to best leverage them when you need to. And the third thing I'd recommend is communication with your peers, communication with your colleagues, and communication with your managers, so that you have that open dialogue where if you are going through a stressful period or having a more challenging time, you have that channel of communication open where you can express that and you can say, "Hey, I'm going through this tough time. I feel like I'm being overworked. There's personal items that are stressing me out. I might need some help here," and they can best direct you to the resources, and they're just aware and they're able to act accordingly and support you. So I say those are the three main things that I would encourage any young professional to do to prioritize their well-being.
Sage words, my friend. I think that is great advice. But let's look to the future, and what are our hopes? How mentally, what does a mentally healthy workplace of the future look like? What are some changes that we hope to happen going forward? Denny, we'll start with you, and then we'll go over to Jackson.
Wow, we could do a podcast just on this topic, Michael. Apparently Microsoft is working on sentiment stuff where right now, just looking at our faces, they could see if we're well or unwell and so on. So obviously, there's a lot happening in the technology space, right? Which is scary too, because think about it, the three of us can invent an app on the weekend and sell it out there. There's no regulation on this, right? There's no certification by CAMH or someone that it's science-based, right? So there's a lot happening on that front in regards to support. I mean, the workforce of the future, um, me perfect world would be that the resources that you need are there and that people can find them, right? And for our listeners today in any organizations, like if you've got an EAP, you should be using it. If you need it, use it. And organizations, I think we could do a better job, Michael, at making sure that our teams know what's there and what's available. And that's at no cost because we're already paying for it, right? Like normally when I'm helping clients and so on, my fun of the day to break the ice is I go, okay, take your mouse and find your mental health benefit. And it's hilarious. Jackson, you should test this if you're helping others. And they're there with their mouse, and sometimes the F-bombs start flying. They can't find anything. Why? You're paying for this stuff, right? Why is there, if you're anxious, how many clicks do you want on your mouse, Michael, before I lose you, right? If it's only one click and boom, you're on the portal and boom, you're at EAP, right? So I dream of redundancy in my role has been defined as the day we could all be standing at the water cooler talking about mental health, just like if I had a broken leg from a ski accident. That's and to me that's embedding, in the training, your people groups, bringing in speakers, making sure that it's on the agenda. A best practice is definitely in kickoff meetings for a big engagement or whatever, you put it on the agenda. You find a team member, maybe even somebody new like Jackson, and you say, "Hey, Jackson, we've got a portal with a bunch of mental health tools. Would you mind just looking at one and talking about it?" And I give Jackson 5 minutes and to kick off of the meeting. He goes, "Hey, I went to Jack.org website. It's amazing. I learned about the 5 golden rules. You guys should check it out." That's it. That's all. No rah, rah, rah. Move on, but just demystify this. And I think we're close, Michael. I mean, and kudos to Jack.org. You are a resource that people can leverage on. I'll never forget when we did a session with a young speaker, Jackson. I don't know if you've heard of this, where we invited our clients to participate, and I was teamed up with one of your Jack taught youth speakers, and we just had a discussion. And just these little things, I think employers could do a better job, Michael, at embedding this in our day to day. Because what happens at home, we take to work, right? I love the statistic that I've learned by hanging out with you guys of it's not 1 in 5, it's 5 in 5. Because if it's not Denis personally suffering, Denis is supporting somebody in a circle of care. So we're all impacted, right?
100%, 100%. We're all impacted. And uh, Jackson, what about you? You've got a lengthy career ahead of you. Um, what does a mentally healthy workplace in your future look like? What changes do you think you'd like to see?
Yeah, I think as Denis mentioned, I think the technology component is really fascinating and is a real opportunity to kind of break the barriers and make this more accessible for employees. So I think, as you mentioned, even the facial recognition software that's going out, and while that certainly does pose some challenges and concerns, being able to tell uh, if your employees are overworked or are going through a tougher time, being able to track their hours online and just flag to your manager automatically, say, if I see an employee online for more than X hours in a week, just get an automatic notification to your manager. Hey, your employee's, he was online for 62 hours last week, maybe check in with them, and having a process there. I think that is a lot of opportunities to make this just easier to implement. But I think as well, continuing at chipping away at breaking down the stigma around mental health in the workplace, continuing to just have it percolate in the culture where it's something that we prioritize, it's something that we care about for our employees' well-being, and just taking a holistic view to your employees that again, as I mentioned, you're not just a widget, you're a whole human being that's bringing yourself to work. And, it's in both the employer and the employee's interest that you're happy at work, you're enjoying your time there, you're in a good state, and it's going to make you more productive, and it's just going to ensure that you're enjoying your time there even more. So I think we've made a lot of progress. I think we've come a long way. I think we have technological advantages that are going to make this even easier to implement. But I think just continuing what we're doing, progress. It's a long march, but we're getting there. And I think I certainly, as a young person, I feel very well supported, and I think it's just improving year by year. And I think the last point I'd add, to Jack.org and just the broader infrastructure that we're building. Like, this infrastructure exists now. That obviously I wasn't around in the workplace 10 or 20 years ago, but I would assume that it was not around or not even close to as sophisticated as it is now. So I think the fact that this infrastructure is built is great, and I think we can just hopefully continue to build upon it moving forward.
Yeah, so I mean, 100%. You don't have to, and you both said that, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Like, you don't have to start from scratch. There's resources out there. It really is just being open and communicating, sharing, and reinforcing all these different resources that are available. It's not just throwing it in a memo and hoping that everyone goes to that. And as Danny said, it should be a click away, right? Where if you ask, that's such a good point, because I can tell you right now, I'm just thinking, can I find mine? Like right away, like that with one click of the mouse? Probably not.
We'll watch
Or kid.
Michael while you do it, and Jackson and I'll have a good laugh for today.
Because you'll be watching for a while, right? But so it's a great point. Listen, so we have come up to we could talk for hours, and you guys have been so generous with your time. We ask, stepping away from just workplace wellness, it's the final question we ask all of our guests on the pod. And that is, what are your hopes for the future of youth mental health? Jackson, we'll start with you, and Denny will go over to you for the last word.
Yeah, I think my hope certainly, and I'll kind of bring this a bit back to the workplace, is I hope that there's no one out there that's a young person that feels like they're not seen. That feels like if they're going through challenges, they're going through it alone, and they aren't. There aren't people there to support them. I think one of the great things that Jack.org does, the Jack Talks and Speaker series, which I participate in as a Jack's Talk speaker, is we go to people in the community and we tell them, if you're going through a mental health episode, if you're going through a tough time, if you're having these stresses, you're not alone, and there are people out here to support you. I think the worst thing is when someone's having stresses with their mental health, they feel like they're the only one going through it. They feel like they're abnormal. They feel like they have no one they can turn to, when that definitely isn't the case. And I think just the proliferation of these resources, making it more accessible, sharing it with a wider and wider audience, and letting them know that it's available and that they have these places that they can turn to. I think that is the best way to show young people that they're not alone, and to provide them with the support they need if they're going through a more difficult time.
Beautifully said. Thank you for that. Denny, what are your hopes for the future of youth mental health?
I would say that nobody suffers in silence, Michael. And we're in a state of transition, right? Because Jackson probably learned about Jack.org at university. Maybe he learned about it in high school. I sure the heck didn't, and sure didn't our parents, right? So generationally, it's helping. But in the meantime, I dream that you'd realize that a lot of the stigma is self-imposed. You're judging yourself. Others aren't judging you. Your family you inherit, but your circle of care you get to pick. So oftentimes it's at work. Jackson, you're new in your career. I'm sure you're finding people in your workspace already that you'd be comfortable that they would be there for you, and talk to them about mental health so that they're prepared, right? And also that you play their part, because as employers, we can have all the buttons and we can have all the tools, but let's say Jackson never invests in his own mental health toolbox. He's not optimizing how prepared he could be to not only care for himself, but for other people in his circle of care. So I dream of a day that the youth would know what the resources are, and that the environment would provide those resources. So coming together, I'm asking for help. My head is not saying me that Jackson's going to judge me if I ask for help. It's the opposite. And that Jackson be properly equipped to be there for me, and know what his role, and know where the resources are that he could drag me to.
Amazing. Well, you both paint a beautiful future that I think is here's what's key about what you both said, is it's attainable. We could do these things. We're on our way to doing these things. These are not pie in the sky ideas, and this is how it should be. And at the end of the day, if we do those things, and if we take those steps, everyone's going to be a lot healthier all around. I want to thank you both for your time, for all you do in the workplace, outside of the workplace, and continue to do around mental health. Is so appreciated, and you are making a difference. Thank you for your time. We learned so much from our guests today. When we talk about workplace wellness, it's not just about creating healthier workspaces, which we should all want, but it's also about more productive workspaces too. We spend more time at work than we do with our families. So if we could create these spaces where it's healthy to go to, what a better world we'd create. And we'd actually kind of live that, that term that's thrown around a lot, whereas work-life balance, we actually live that. And that's where we ultimately want to get to. So healthier workspaces, better lives, better futures. Hey, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time on Jack Amplified.